In the summer of 2010, Kevin Rose sat in Digg's San Francisco headquarters, staring at what he believed would be the company's salvation. After 6 years of building one of the internet's most influential social news platforms, Rose and his team were about to launch Digg version 4, a complete reimagining of the site that had once commanded more traffic than the New York Times website. The redesign was meant to compete with Facebook and Twitter's growing dominance in social media, but within 48 hours of its launch on August 25, 2010, Digg would lose over 35% of its user base in what became known as one of the most catastrophic product launches in internet history. The Great Digg migration had begun, and Reddit, a scrappy competitor that Digg had once dismissed as a mere clone, would inherit the crown of social news aggregation that Digg had pioneered. The story of Digg begins in 2004, when Kevin Rose, a former tech TV host with spiky hair and an infectious enthusiasm for technology, grew frustrated with the state of online news. Traditional media outlets controlled what stories reached the public, and even early social news sites relied heavily on editorial curation. Rose envisioned something revolutionary, a completely democratic news platform where users, not editors, would decide what stories deserved attention. Working from his apartment with co-founder Owen Burns, Rose built the first version of Digg in just 6 weeks, launching it on December 5, 2004. The concept was elegantly simple. Users could submit links to interesting stories and other users could dig them up or bury them down, with the most popular stories rising to the front page through pure democratic voting. This wasn't just another website, it was a fundamental reimagining of how information could flow in the digital age. Digg's early growth was nothing short of meteoric. By 2005, the site was receiving over 8,000 story submissions daily and had attracted its first round of venture capital funding. The platform's influence extended far beyond its user count. A single front-page feature on Digg could crash a website's servers, a phenomenon known as the Digg effect that became the gold standard for viral traffic. Major brands and publishers began optimizing their content specifically for Digg, studying the platform's algorithm and user behavior patterns like ancient oracles reading tea leaves. Rose became the face of Web 2.0, gracing magazine covers and commanding speaking fees that rivaled Fortune 500 CEOs. Time magazine named him one of the most influential people in the world in 2005, calling him the guy who democratized the news. By 2008, Digg was processing over 350 million page views monthly and had raised $45 million in venture funding, with valuations reaching $200 million. The site employed over 100 people and had become required reading for anyone who wanted to understand where online culture was heading. But even during Digg's golden years, cracks were beginning to show in its democratic foundation. Power users, a small group of prolific submitters who understood the platform's algorithm intimately, began gaming the system to promote their preferred content. A study in 2010 revealed that just 100 users were responsible for 56% of Digg's front-page stories, turning what was supposed to be a democratic platform into an oligarchy. These power users formed informal networks coordinating their voting to push certain stories while burying others, effectively recreating the editorial gatekeeping that Digg was designed to eliminate. The algorithm that once seemed so elegant began showing its weaknesses as spam submissions increased, and legitimate stories from unknown users struggled to gain traction. Users complained about the increasing commercialization of the platform, with brands and marketing agencies employing teams of fake accounts to artificially promote their content. Meanwhile, a small team at a company called Reddit, founded by Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian just 4 months after Digg's launch, was quietly observing these problems and building solutions into their competing platform. The relationship between Digg and Reddit was complicated from the beginning, marked by both mutual respect and intense rivalry. When Reddit launched in June 2005, many dismissed it as a mere Digg clone, and the similarities were undeniable. Both platforms allowed users to submit links and vote on them, with popular content rising to the top. However, Reddit's founders made several crucial design decisions that would prove prescient. Instead of Digg's single front page, Reddit was organized into subreddits, specialized communities focused on specific topics where users could find and discuss niche interests. While Digg optimized for mainstream appeal and viral content, Reddit embraced the long tail of internet culture, creating spaces for everything from programming discussions to obscure hobbies. Reddit's voting system was also more nuanced, showing both upvotes and downvotes rather than just net scores, which provided users with more information about community sentiment. Most importantly, Reddit fostered a comment culture that was deeper and more engaging than Digg's relatively shallow discussions, creating genuine communities rather than just content aggregation. Throughout the late 2000s, as Digg basked in mainstream media attention and million-dollar funding rounds, Reddit remained in its shadow, growing slowly but steadily. Reddit's traffic in 2008 was roughly 1/10 of Digg's, and the site operated with a skeleton crew and minimal funding after being acquired by Condé Nast in 2006 for just $20 million, a fraction of Digg's valuation at the time. However, Reddit's users were more engaged and loyal, spending significantly more time on the site and contributing higher quality discussions. While Digg optimized for the casual browser who might visit once a day to see trending stories, Reddit built a platform for digital natives who wanted to dive deep into communities and conversations. This difference in user engagement would prove crucial when both platforms faced their respective crises, as Reddit's community proved more resilient and forgiving of the platform's growing pains. The beginning of the end for Digg came with a series of strategic missteps that alienated its core community. In 2007, Digg introduced a bury feature that allowed users to vote down content, but the implementation was clunky and often resulted in good content being unfairly suppressed by coordinated attacks. The company also began experimenting with promoted content and advertising integration that many users felt compromised the platform's editorial independence. More damaging was Digg's response to criticism and gaming attempts. Instead of fostering dialogue with its community, the company often responded defensively or ignored user concerns entirely. The infamous 09F911029D74E35BD84156C5635688C0 incident in 2007, where Digg initially tried to remove posts containing an HD DVD encryption key under legal pressure, demonstrated how out of touch the company had become with its own users' values. When users revolted by flooding the site with the forbidden code, Digg eventually capitulated, but the damage to the company's reputation as a champion of free information was severe. By 2009, Kevin Rose and his team knew that Digg needed to evolve or die. Facebook had reached 350 million users, and Twitter was processing over 600 million tweets per day, while Digg's growth had stagnated around 40 million monthly visitors. The company's leadership became convinced that Digg's problem was its dated interface and lack of social features, not its fundamental community management issues. They embarked on a complete rebuild of the platform, spending over 2 years and millions of dollars developing what would become Digg version 4. The new version would integrate Facebook and Twitter, allow publishers to submit content directly, and completely redesign the user interface to be more modern and social media friendly. During development, the team made the fatal decision to remove several features that power users relied on, including the ability to see who had dug a story, the bury button, and detailed user profiles. They also implemented an algorithm change that gave more weight to content from verified publishers and users with large social media followings, effectively ending the era of true democratic voting that had made Digg famous. When Digg v4 launched on August 25, 2010, the reaction was swift and devastating. Users immediately noticed that the front page was dominated by content from major publishers like CNN and TechCrunch rather than the diverse, user-submitted content that had made Digg special. The new interface was confusing and removed many of the features that longtime users considered essential. Most insulting to the community was the revelation that brands and publishers could now auto-submit content directly to Digg, bypassing the democratic submission process entirely. Within 24 hours, Digg's own comment sections were flooded with complaints and calls to migrate to Reddit. The #NewDigg hashtag on Twitter became a repository of user anger and frustration. Traffic analytics showed a 25% drop in unique visitors within the first week, and more damaging still, user engagement metrics like time spent on site and comments per story plummeted by over 40%. The very power users who had been accused of gaming the old system suddenly looked valuable compared to the corporate-friendly algorithmic feed that replaced them. The great migration from Digg to Reddit began almost immediately and accelerated through the fall of 2010. Reddit's traffic doubled between August and December 2010, with many new users explicitly citing Digg v4 as their reason for switching platforms. Reddit's founders, who had been struggling with server capacity and funding issues, suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by an influx of engaged, experienced social news users who brought with them years of accumulated knowledge about online community dynamics. The timing couldn't have been better for Reddit. The platform had recently introduced several features that addressed the power user problems that had plagued Digg, including better spam detection, more transparent moderation, and improved subreddit discovery. Reddit also benefited from having a more mature comment system and stronger community norms that helped integrate the Digg refugees without losing the site's distinctive culture. Digg's leadership initially dismissed the user revolt as temporary growing pains, believing that the new design would attract mainstream users to replace the departed power users. Kevin Rose publicly defended the redesign in interviews, arguing that Digg needed to evolve beyond its niche community to achieve true scale and profitability. However, internal metrics told a different story. Not only were existing users leaving, but new user acquisition had slowed to a trickle. The mainstream audience that V4 was designed to attract never materialized, partly because casual internet users had already migrated to Facebook and Twitter for their social news consumption. Major publishers, initially excited about the direct submission features, found that their Digg traffic was worth less than traffic from other sources because Digg users were no longer the engaged, tech-savvy audience that had made the Digg effect so valuable. By early 2011, Digg's traffic had fallen by over 60% from its peak, and the site was processing fewer daily submissions than it had in 2006. The final years of Digg as an independent company were marked by desperate attempts to recapture its former glory and mounting financial pressures. In September 2010, just weeks after the V4 disaster, Rose stepped down as CEO, though he remained involved with the company. His replacement, Matt Williams, attempted to address user concerns with Digg v4.1, which restored some removed features and reduced the prominence of publisher content, but the changes were too little, too late. The core community had already established itself on Reddit and other platforms, and rebuilding trust proved impossible. Digg's valuation, once as high as $200 million, plummeted as the company struggled to attract new investment. Revenue from advertising and partnerships dried up as traffic continued to decline, and the company was forced to lay off significant portions of its staff. By 2012, Digg was processing fewer than 10 million monthly page views, less than many individual subreddits on Reddit. Meanwhile, Reddit's rise accelerated throughout 2011 and 2012, fueled not just by former Digg users, but by a new generation of internet users who valued deep discussion and niche communities over viral content and mainstream appeal. Reddit's unique culture, irreverent, intellectual, and fiercely protective of user anonymity and free speech, proved more resilient and scalable than Digg's celebrity-driven, mainstream-focused approach. The platform's Ask Me Anything feature became a cultural phenomenon, attracting everyone from Barack Obama to Bill Gates, while subreddits like r/IAMA, r/Science, and r/Technology provided the kind of substantive content that Digg had once been known for. Reddit's decentralized structure, where individual communities could develop their own rules and cultures, solved many of the governance problems that had plagued Digg's single community approach. By 2012, Reddit was receiving over 2 billion page views monthly, more than 5 times Digg's peak traffic, and had become the undisputed front page of the internet. The final chapter of Digg's story came in July 2012, when the company sold its assets to BetaWorks for just $500,000, a fraction of its former valuation and barely enough to cover its outstanding debts. The sale included Digg's domain name, website, and technology, but not its staff, most of whom were laid off immediately. BetaWorks, a New York-based startup incubator, relaunched Digg as a simplified news aggregation service, abandoning the social voting features that had made the original platform famous. Kevin Rose moved on to other ventures, including a stint at Google Ventures, while the Digg brand became a cautionary tale about the importance of listening to your community and understanding what makes your product truly valuable. The new Digg, while competently designed, never recaptured even a fraction of its predecessor's influence or traffic, serving more as a digital monument to what had once been one of the internet's most important platforms. The story of Digg's rise and fall offers profound lessons about the nature of online communities and the dangers of prioritizing growth over user satisfaction. Digg succeeded initially because it solved a real problem, democratizing news curation, and built a passionate community around that solution. However, the company's leadership fundamentally misunderstood what made their platform valuable, focusing on metrics like total traffic and mainstream appeal while neglecting the engaged users who created the content and conversations that made Digg worth visiting. The V4 redesign wasn't just a user interface change. It was a philosophical pivot away from the democratic ideals that had made Digg revolutionary. Reddit's triumph wasn't just about having better technology or more funding. It was about understanding and respecting the communities that make social platforms valuable. Today, as Reddit faces its own challenges with commercialization and content moderation, the ghost of Digg serves as a reminder that even the most successful platforms are only as strong as the communities that choose to call them home. The democratization of media that Digg pioneered lives on, but the company that started the revolution learned too late that in the attention economy, betraying your users' trust isn't just bad business, it's digital suicide.